The warning came on a cold morning when 3 moons still hung in the purple sky above Velcora, and Liara was feeding her dragons their breakfast of crystallized starlight when the emergency beacon lit up her communication panel. Ember the smaller, red and gold dragon chirped in alarm and nearly knocked over the feeding bowl, while Frost the larger blue dragon spread his wings wide and hissed at the flashing light as if he could intimidate it into silence. Liara moved quickly to the panel, and her heart dropped when she saw the council seal blinking urgent red across the screen. In her 300 years as a scout, she had only seen that color twice, and both times it meant something terrible had happened somewhere in the galaxy. Pressed her palm against the reader and the message began to play. Scout. Liara, you are ordered to report immediately to Council Station 7 for emergency briefing. All leave is cancelled and all scouts are being recalled. This is a priority alpha situation. The message ended there with no explanation and no details, but Liara did not need more information to know this was serious priority. Alpha meant a threat to multiple worlds, or possibly to the Council itself. She gathered her supplies quickly, throwing clothes and equipment into travel cases while Ember and Frost watched with worried eyes. The dragons could sense her fear, even though she tried to hide it, and they pressed close to her legs as she moved around her small home. The flight to Council Station 7 took 2 days through hyperspace, and when Liara arrived, she found the station buzzing with activity, like a nest of angry insect. Scouts from a dozen different species crowded the halls, their faces showing the same confusion and worry that Liara felt. She made her way to the main briefing room where a counselor named Vex was waiting. Vex was a tall creature with silver skin and 4 arms, and he looked more stressed than Liara had ever seen him. "Take your seats," he said, without greeting or small talk, and the room fell silent immediately. 3 weeks ago, Vex began a species called the Crothians attacked a human mining colony in the Outer Rim sectors. The Crothians are known to you all as aggressive expansionists, but they have always stopped short of attacking established civilizations until now. Liara felt Ember tighten around her shoulders. The little dragon did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. The human colony had 5,000 residents. Vex continued, most of them civilians, miners, and their families. The Crothians gave no warning and no demands. They simply opened fire. A hologram appeared above the table showing the colony, or what was left of it. Buildings reduced to smoking craters, and fields turned to glass by energy weapons. "The humans responded," Vex said, and something in his voice made Liara lean forward. "How many ships did they send?" she asked. "The Crothians brought 300 warships." Vex replied, "Their entire 7th fleet. It was meant to be a show of force, a message that no one could stand against them, and the humans Liara pressed. The humans brought 12 ships. The room erupted in confused whispers. 12 ships against 300 was not a battle. It was a massacre, waiting to happen. The human fleet engaged the Crothians at 0600 hours station time. Vex said over the noise the battle lasted 6 hours when it ended. All 300 Crothian ships were destroyed or disabled. The 12 human vessels returned to their space with minor damage to 3 of their ships. The room went completely silent. "That is impossible," someone said from the back, a scout from the insectoid Jinn species. "No species has that kind of military advantage. The mathematics do not work." "The mathematics did work," Vex said quietly, because the humans are from a death world. Liara had heard the term before. Death worlds were planets so hostile that they should not be able to support intelligent life worlds where the gravity crushed bones, where the atmosphere was toxic, where predators hunted in packs and diseases evolved faster than medicine could fight them. Most species avoided death worlds entirely, and the few species that came from them were usually aggressive and difficult to control. Earth scores a class 12 on the Death World Index. Vex continued, "Only 3 other known species come from worlds rated above class 8, and none of them have developed faster than light travel. The humans achieved spaceflight 200 years ago, and they have been expanding rapidly ever since." "What do they want?" Liara asked. "That is what we need you to find out." Vex turned to look directly at her scout. "Liara, you have the best diplomatic record of any scout in the fleet, and your dragons give you a unique advantage. Many species respond positively to bonded companions. It makes you seem less threatening. So you want me to make first contact with a species that just destroyed 300 warships, she said slowly. Vex nodded. We need to know if the humans are a threat to the galaxy, or if they can be reasoned with. The Crothians were monsters who had destroyed 14 civilizations before the humans stopped them. But the ease with which the humans won concerns us. What if they are hostile, Liara asked. What if they see the Council as their next target? Then we need to know that too, Vex said. And we need to know it before they arrive at our doorstep. Liara looked down at Ember, who chirped softly and nuzzled against her cheek, then at Frost, who met her gaze with his bright blue eyes. The dragons trusted her completely, and she had never led them into danger she could not handle. When do I leave, she asked. Your ship is being prepared now. Vex said you launch in 4 hours. Liara stood and bowed slightly, then turned to leave the briefing room behind her. She could hear other scouts being given their assignments, but none of them seemed to be heading toward human space. She was going alone into the unknown, to meet the species that had terrified the entire galaxy, and she had 4 hours to prepare. Ember chirped nervously, and Liara scratched behind his small horns trying to calm him, but her hand was shaking slightly. Easy boy, she whispered. We will be fine, we always are. But as she walked toward her ship, she could not shake the feeling that nothing was going to be fine ever again. The jump to human space took 3 days, and Liara spent every hour of it reading reports about Earth and its people. The information was limited because humans had only made contact with the wider galaxy 50 years ago, but what she found both fascinated and frightened her. Earth was a nightmare world by any reasonable standard. The gravity was 30% higher than what most species considered comfortable. The atmosphere contained oxygen at levels that would be toxic to many races, and the planet was covered in massive oceans that created violent storms capable of destroying cities. But the life on Earth was what truly shocked her. The reports described creatures called sharks that had existed unchanged for millions of years, because they were already perfect predators, and things called bears that could weigh over half a ton and run faster than most species could sprint, and insects called mosquitoes that killed more humans every year than any other creature on the planet. And yet humans had not just survived on this death trap. They had thrived, they had built civilizations and art and music. They had reached their moon using primitive rockets and then pushed out into the solar system and beyond. Ember sat on her lap while she read, and occasionally he would make small worried sounds when her heart rate increased. The little dragon could sense her fear, and it made him anxious. It is all right, she told him, stroking his red and gold scales. They are just people, like any other people. But she did not believe it, and Ember knew she did not believe it. Frost lay across the back of her chair, too large now to sit comfortably on her shoulders, and his blue eyes watched the view screen as if he expected danger to appear at any moment. Dragons were not intelligent in the way people were intelligent, but they were smart enough to know when their bonded human was scared. On the 3rd day, the computer announced they were approaching human space, and Liara moved to the pilot seat with both dragons arranging themselves around her, Ember on her left shoulder, and Frost stretched across the back of the seat behind her head. She dropped out of hyperspace, and for a moment, everything was calm. She could see Earth. In the distance, a blue and green marble hanging in the black, and around it orbited dozens of stations and satellites. Then every alarm in her ship started screaming. 17 human warships had appeared around her seemingly from nowhere, and her sensors told her that each one was larger than anything the Council had in its fleet. The weapons pointed at her ship could have turned her into atoms before she even knew she was dead. A communication channel opened before she could move. Hello there. The voice was female and calm, as if surrounding a foreign ship with enough firepower to destroy a small moon was just a normal thing to do on a Tuesday afternoon. Liara forced her voice to stay steady, even though her hands were shaking. This is Scout, Liara of the Galactic Council. I come in peace, seeking to establish first contact protocols. There was a pause, and she could hear voices in the background. Someone was laughing, and another voice said something about the dragon things being real. The female voice came back with clear amusement in it. I am Captain Helen Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet and speaking for humanity. We appreciate the peaceful approach, given what happened with the Crothians. We figured you might be nervous. Nervous was putting it mildly, but Liara kept her diplomatic training in place. The Crothians attacked your colony without provocation, The Council does not blame humanity for defending itself. Another pause, shorter this time. Scout Liara, your bio readings indicate you are not human and your ship does not match Crothian design. What exactly are you? I am Velkaran. Liara said, we are one of the founding members of the Galactic Council. My species has been spacefaring for over 10,000 years. Frost shifted behind her head and made a low rumbling sound that meant he was trying to decide if the human voice was a threat. Well, then Captain Torres said, and her tone changed to something more serious. You have been flying between stars for 10,000 years, and in all that time did you ever encounter the Crothians before they started their conquest spree? Yes, Liara admitted, we knew of them. They were considered dangerous but manageable. And how many species did they wipe out before the Council decided to do something about them? The question felt like a punch to the stomach. Liara knew the answer, and she knew how it would sound. 14 civilizations had been completely destroyed before the Council even mobilized its forces. 14, Captain Torres said when Liara did not answer. The Crothians destroyed 14 species and your Council sent strongly worded messages. Then they came to our little corner of space and attacked a mining colony with 5,000 civilians. Liara closed her eyes. My government would say that the galaxy is vast and resources are limited. Your government would be wrong. The words were flat and final, and the communication channel went silent. Liara sat there with her dragons pressed against her and wondered if she was about to die. The humans had every right to be angry. The Council had failed to protect anyone until humanity had done it themselves. Then Captain Torres spoke again. Scout. Liara. You came here seeking understanding, so let me offer you some. Understanding requires honesty. And honestly, your Council terrifies us more than the Crothians ever did. That made no sense. The Council is a force for peace and cooperation. Liara protested. The Council watched 14 species die because stopping. It would have been difficult, Captain Torres replied. The Crothians were brutal, but at least they were honest about what they wanted. Your Council speaks of peace while entire civilizations burn because intervention might be complicated, Ember chirped softly against Liara's ear, and she reached up to stroke his scales. The little dragon was trying to comfort her, and it helped, even though her world was turning upside down. She had never thought of the Council that way. In her mind they were wise, and careful. Not acting immediately was strategy. Not cowardice, but hearing it from someone outside the system made it sound different. It made it sound like exactly what it was. Failure dressed up in diplomatic language. What do you want? She asked. Captain Torres. We want to make sure that what happened to those 14 species never happens again. The human said it simply, like it was obvious. We want a galaxy where when someone screams for help, the response is not a committee meeting. And you will enforce this? Liara asked. How many will you conquer? None, Captain Torres said firmly. We do not want an empire. We want allies, real ones who stand together. Liara felt something crack inside her chest. I would like to come aboard your ship, Liara said, before she could stop herself. If you will have me. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever, and she wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake. Captain Torres had every reason to refuse, or worse, to accept and then treat her as a prisoner. You understand that could be dangerous. Captain Torres finally said, we do not know your biology. You do not know our intentions. I have 2 dragons, a ship full of medical supplies, and 300 years of diplomatic training, Liara replied, and found herself smiling slightly. If you wanted me dead, I would already be gone. The fact that we are still talking means you value life, even when it would be easier not to. That tells me everything I need to know. Captain Torres laughed. It was a warm sound that made Liara relax just a little. It is not often someone calls humanity soft. I did not say soft. Liara said, I said human. And perhaps that is exactly what this galaxy needs. Permission granted. Scout Liara, welcome to Earth. The docking procedure took an hour, and Liara spent the time preparing herself and her dragons for whatever came next. Ember was nervous and kept making small chirping sounds while Frost remained calm but alert, his blue eyes tracking every movement on the view screen. When the airlock finally opened, Liara stepped through with both dragons and found herself in a corridor that was surprisingly normal. It looked like any other ship she had been on, metal walls with lights embedded in the ceiling and signs in a language she could not read, But her translator picked up. Captain Torres was waiting for her, and Liara was struck by how ordinary she looked. The human was average height with dark hair pulled back in, a practical style and brown eyes that watched Liara with curiosity rather than hostility. She wore a uniform that was clean, but not fancy, and she smiled when she saw the dragons. "Those are beautiful creatures," she said, May. Liara nodded, and Captain Torres stepped forward slowly, extending her hand toward Ember. The little dragon sniffed her fingers carefully, then chirped and rubbed his head against her palm. "He likes you," Liara said, surprised. "I had a dog when I was young." Captain Torres said, scratching. Behind Ember's horns, the way Liara did, animals recognize kindness. "I think," Frost made a rumbling sound, and Captain Torres turned to look at him. "And this one is more cautious. He is protective." Liara explained, "He takes his job seriously." Captain Torres smiled, then gestured down the corridor. "Come on, I will show you around and we can talk properly." They walked through the ship, and Liara was amazed by what she saw. The human vessel was not just a warship. It had gardens where food was grown and recreation, areas where crew members were playing games and laughing. There were families here, children running through corridors and elderly people sitting in common areas talking. "This is a military ship," Liara said, confused. "It is," Captain Torres confirmed, "but it is also home for 3,000 people. We believe that keeping families together makes for better soldiers and better people. The Council separates military personnel from their families," Liara said, thinking of her own small apartment back on Velcora. "Efficiency is considered more important than comfort." "And how is that working out?" Captain Torres asked gently. Liara did not have an answer to that. They eventually reached a large room with windows that looked out at Earth, and Captain Torres gestured for Liara to sit at a table while a crew member brought them drinks. "Tell me about the Council, Captain," Torres said. "I want to understand how 14 civilizations could be destroyed while the most powerful organization in the galaxy did nothing." Liara took a deep breath and tried to organize her thoughts. "The Council is old," she began. "It was formed over 30,000 years ago by 5 species who wanted to create peace and stability in the galaxy." "That sounds noble," Captain Torres said. "It was," Liara agreed. "For a long time it worked. The Council mediated disputes and shared technology and helped younger species develop. But somewhere along the way, things changed." "Changed how?" "The Council became more concerned with maintaining the Council than with helping people," Liara said, and saying it out loud felt like betrayal but also like truth. "When the Crothians started their expansion, the Council held meetings and debates. Everyone agreed something should be done, but no one wanted to be the one to do it. Why not? Because it would be expensive," Liara said simply, "and because it might fail, and failure would make the Council look weak. So they waited and waited until the cost of action seemed too high, and 14 species died while they waited." Captain Torres said, "Yes." Liara whispered. Ember nuzzled against her cheek, sensing her distress, and she held him close. The little dragon was warm and solid and real in a way that Council politics had never been. Captain Torres was quiet for a long moment, then she said, "When the Crothians attacked our colony, we had a choice. We could report it to the Council and wait for someone else to handle it, or we could defend our people." "You chose to defend them," Liara said. "Of course we did." "Captain," Torres looked genuinely confused by the question. "They were our people. Our responsibility. No one else was going to save them. And now the galaxy fears you," Liara said, "because you proved you could destroy anyone who threatens you." Captain Torres shook her head. "We do not want the galaxy to fear us." Scout Liara, "We want the galaxy to understand that we will not stand by while people suffer. We will not have committee meetings while colonies burn." "What if the Council orders you to stand down?" Liara asked. "What if they demand you stop interfering? Then they will be disappointed." Captain Torres said simply, "We did not come to the stars to bow to bureaucrats. We came to build a better future." Liara felt tears forming in her eyes, and she did not fully understand why. Maybe it was because she had spent 300 years serving a system she had believed in, only to discover it was broken. Or maybe it was because she was meeting someone who still believed that things could be better. Your government. will not like this, she warned. The Council has resources and allies. They could make things very difficult for humanity. Let them try, Captain Torres said, and there was steel in her voice. We survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. We will survive. Politicians Frost made an approving rumble from where he lay across the back of Liara's chair, and Captain Torres laughed. I think your dragon agrees with me, she said. He usually has good judgment. Liara admitted. They talked for hours after that about Earth and Velcora, about the differences in their cultures and the similarities in their hopes. Captain Torres told her about human history, the struggles and triumphs, the mistakes and the lessons learned, and Liara found herself sharing things she had never told anyone about her doubts and fears about the Council. When the conversation finally wound down, Captain Torres asked, So what will you tell them when you go back? Liara looked at her dragons, then at the Earth hanging outside the window, then back at the human captain who had treated her with more honesty than her own government ever had. I will tell them the truth. She said that humanity is not the threat they fear. And what is the threat? Captain Torres asked. We are, Liara said quietly. The Council is we have become so afraid of making mistakes that we have stopped trying to do anything right. Liara spent 3 days aboard the human ship, and every day changed her understanding of what she thought she knew about the galaxy captain. Torres introduced her to the crew, and Liara met people from every part of Earth, engineers from places called India and Brazil, doctors from regions named Kenya and Canada, and soldiers from islands called Japan and Jamaica. The diversity was overwhelming, in a wonderful way. On Velcora, everyone looked similar, slight builds with pale skin and silver hair. The Council species were mostly the same within their own kinds, but humans came in every shade and size, and they celebrated it rather than trying to standardize themselves. She met a medic named Lisa Chen, who examined both dragons with gentle hands and declared them healthy and beautiful. She met a pilot called Marcus Webb who showed her the human fighters and explained how they could move in ways that would kill most species through acceleration alone. And she met an elderly woman named Grace Potter who had been on the mining colony when the Crothians attacked. Grace sat with Liara in the garden area with Ember curled in her lap and told her story in a quiet voice that shook only a little. They came at dawn. She said there was no warning, no communication. The sky just filled with ships, and then the weapons started firing. Liara listened with Frost pressed against her side. The big dragon seemed to understand that this story was important, that it mattered. My daughter was in the school she worked as a teacher. Grace continued. The building took a direct hit in the first wave. Liara felt her chest tighten. I am so sorry, she whispered. Grace nodded, tears running down her weathered face. The human fleet arrived 2 hours later, she said, and I remember thinking it was too late, that we were all going to die. But then the sky filled with human ships and they fought like nothing I had ever seen. She looked up at Liara with red eyes. They saved us. Scout Liara, 3,000 of us survived because humanity decided that our lives mattered more than politics or strategy or whatever else the Council considered important. What happened to the Council peacekeepers? Liara asked, though she already knew the answer. They arrived. 4 days later, Grace said, her voice bitter. 4 days after the battle was over, after we had buried our dead and started rebuilding. They arrived with medical supplies and condolences and apologies. Liara closed her eyes, feeling shame burn through her. I am sorry, she said again. I am sorry, my people failed you. Grace reached over and took her hand, surprising her. You are here now. She said you came to understand. That takes courage. After that conversation, Liara asked Captain Torres to show her the battle recordings. She needed to see what had actually happened when humanity faced the Crothians. She needed to understand how 12 ships had defeated 300. They watched the recordings in a strategy room with several other officers present, and Liara felt Ember and Frost press closer to her as the battle played out on the screens. The Crothian fleet had been massive dark ships bristling with weapons arranged in the standard attack formation that had crushed every resistance they had faced, and they had opened fire on the colony without hesitation. Then the human ships arrived. Liara had seen many space battles in her 3 centuries of service. She understood tactics and strategy and ship capabilities, but what the humans Made no sense by conventional warfare standards. They did not maintain safe distances or use defensive formations. Instead, they charged directly into the Crothian fleet, moving so fast that several Crothian ships fired on each other trying to track them, and the human weapons were devastating. Every shot seemed to hit something vital. But it was not just the technology that won the battle. It was the way the humans fought with a ferocity and determination that the Crothians had not expected. They protected each other, covering damaged ships and drawing fire away from wounded vessels. And when one human destroyer took critical damage and could not escape, its captain deliberately rammed a Crothian carrier, taking both ships out in a massive explosion. That pilot had a family, Captain Torres said quietly. Watching the recording, her voice was thick with emotion. She chose to save the colony instead of saving herself. Liara could not speak. The sacrifice was beyond anything she had witnessed. In council service, most species, including her own, would have retreated when faced with those odds. They would have calculated the acceptable losses and withdrawn to preserve their forces. Humans fought differently. They fought like every single life mattered, like losing was not an option, even when the mathematics said it should be. "We call it stubbornness," Captain Torres said with a sad smile, "but really, it is just refusing to accept that some people are acceptable casualties. The council would say that sometimes sacrifice is necessary for the greater good," Liara said. "And we would say that anyone who talks about the greater good while sitting safely behind a desk has never actually sacrificed anything." Captain Torres replied. Over the next 2 days, Liara interviewed dozens of crew members, asking them about Earth and human culture, and what she learned both amazed and horrified her. Humans had almost destroyed themselves multiple times, wars that killed millions, conflicts over resources, and ideology and religion. They had created weapons capable of rendering their entire planet uninhabitable, and had come terrifyingly close to using them. But they had also created incredible beauty art and music that moved Liara to tears, stories that made her laugh and think and question, and they had reached out to the stars not to conquer but to explore, to find new friends and new possibilities. She learned about human concepts like democracy, where leaders were chosen by the people they served and could be removed if they failed, and about human rights, the idea that every person deserved dignity and freedom, regardless of their birth or status. The council had similar ideals on paper, but in practice, the old species held all the power and younger civilizations were expected to follow their guidance without question. Humanity rejected that completely. They believed that every species, every person, had equal worth, and they were willing to fight to prove it. On her last evening, aboard the ship, Captain Torres took her to the observation deck where they could see Earth rotating slowly below them. "It is beautiful," Liara said, and meant it. Captain Torres nodded. "We nearly lost it," she said. "A dozen times in our history we came close to destroying everything, but we learned." "What did you learn?" Liara asked. "That the only thing worth fighting for is each other," Captain Torres said. "Not territory or resources or ideology, just people, keeping them safe, giving them hope, helping them build something better." "The council would say that is naive," Liara said. "The council watched 14 species die while debating the correct diplomatic approach." Captain Torres replied, "I will take naive over that any day." Liara felt tears on her cheeks and did not bother to wipe them away. "I do not know what to do," she admitted. "I have served the council my entire life. I believed we were making the galaxy better. But now you know the truth." Captain Torres said gently, "That belief without action is just comfortable lies." "What happens when I report back to the council?" Liara asked. "What happens when I tell them that humanity will not submit to their authority?" Captain Torres smiled. "Then I suppose we will find out if the council values peace more than pride." Liara looked down at her dragon's Ember sleeping peacefully in her lap, and Frost watching the stars with patient eyes, and she made a decision that would change everything. "I want to help," she said. "I want to help humanity build something better." Captain Torres looked at her carefully. "You understand what that means? Your own people will see you as a traitor." "I know," Liara said, "but I have been a loyal servant to a broken system for 300 years. Maybe it is time I was a traitor to a worthy cause." Captain Torres extended her hand and Liara took it, sealing a partnership that would reshape the galaxy. The return to Council Station 7 was the longest journey of Liara's life. Not because of distance, but because of dread. She knew what she had to do, and she knew the price she would pay for doing it. Ember sensed her anxiety and stayed close, chirping softly and nuzzling her cheek while Frost maintained his protective position, watching every shadow as if enemies might appear at any moment. The dragons did not understand politics, but they understood loyalty, and they would stand with her no matter what came. When her ship docked, she was immediately summoned to the council chambers, and as she walked through the familiar corridors with her dragons, she felt like a stranger in a place she had called home for 3 centuries. Counselor Vex was waiting with 4 other senior council members, their faces arranged in expressions of polite interest that did not quite hide their concern. Scout Liara Vex said formally, "Welcome back. Please share your report on the human species." Liara stood before them with Ember on her shoulder and Frost at her side and took a deep breath. "I have completed my assessment of humanity," she began. "They are not a threat to the council." Relief washed across several faces, but Vex remained cautious. "Explain," he said. "Humanity comes from what they call a death world." Liara continued, "Their planet has prepared them for challenges that would break most species. They are strong and resilient, and they have technology that exceeds our current understanding in several areas. This matches our initial intelligence," Vex said. "So they are dangerous." "They are capable," Liara corrected. "There is a difference. They have the ability to cause great harm, but they choose not to." "How can you be certain?" one of the other counselors asked, a thin creature from the moth species. "What guarantee do we have that they will not turn their weapons on us, because they had every opportunity to do so, and instead they offered me friendship?" Liara said, "I spent 3 days aboard their flagship, interviewed their people. I studied their culture and history, and I learned something important." "What did you learn?" Vex asked. "That we are the problem," Liara said quietly. The council chamber went silent, and Liara could feel the temperature of the room drop several degrees. "Explain yourself," Vex said, his voice tight. "The Crothians destroyed 14 civilizations," Liara said, "and we did nothing. We held meetings and sent messages and debated proper responses while entire species were wiped from existence. And then when humanity defended themselves against the same threat, we label them as dangerous. We label them dangerous because they refuse to follow proper diplomatic channels." Vex said they acted unilaterally without council approval because waiting for council approval would have meant more deaths, Liara shot back. "You sent me to evaluate whether humans are a threat. But the real question is why they needed to act at all. Why was the council not there?" "We have limited resources," the Moth counselor said. "We cannot respond to every crisis." "You have unlimited excuses," Liara said, and was shocked by her own boldness. "I have served the council faithfully for 300 years. I have never questioned orders or policy, but I cannot stay silent anymore. We have become exactly what we claim to prevent a power that maintains itself through inaction." "This is treason," another counselor said, a stocky being from the rock-eater species. "This is truth," Liara replied. "Humanity showed me what we have lost. They fight for people, not for territory or resources or political advantage. They believe that every life has value, and they act on that belief while we debate it." "What do you propose?" Vex asked, and something in his tone made Liara think he was not as opposed to her words as he appeared. "I propose we offer humanity a partnership," Liara said, "not as members who must follow our rules, but as equals who can help us remember what the council was meant to be." "And if the council refuses?" Vex asked. "Then I will resign my position," Liara said, "and I will offer my services to humanity as an independent liaison." "You would betray your own people," the Rock-Eater counselor said, shocked. "I would serve the principles my people claim to value." Liara corrected. "There is a difference." The council members looked at each other, speaking in the silent way that powerful people communicate when they do not want others to hear. And Liara stood there with her dragons and waited for judgment. Finally, Vex spoke. "You have given us much to consider, Scout Liara. You are dismissed while we deliberate. Return to your quarters and await our decision." Liara bowed and turned to leave, but Vex called after her. Scout Liara, he said you should know that you are not the only one who has begun asking these questions. She looked back at him and saw something in his eyes that might have been approval, or might have been fear. Change is coming, Vex said quietly. Whether the council is ready or not. Liara returned to her quarters and spent the next 6 hours pacing while Ember tried to calm her, and Frost watched the door as if expecting soldiers to burst through at any moment. When the summons finally came, it was not to the council chambers, but to a private meeting room, and only Vex was waiting there. Sit, he said, gesturing to a chair. Liara sat with both dragons arranging themselves protectively around her. The council has reached a decision. Vex said your report has been noted, and your recommendations are being considered. That sounds like a polite way of saying no, Liara replied. Vex smiled slightly. It is a polite way of saying not. Yet he said the council moves slowly. Scout Liara, you know this. But movement is still movement. What does that mean for me? Liara asked. It means, you are being reassigned. Vex said you will serve as the official council liaison to humanity, working to establish formal diplomatic relations. Yara felt hope flutter in her chest. That is not what I expected, she admitted. The council is not ready to change, Vex said. But they are not ready to be left behind either. Humanity has shown us that the galaxy is changing whether we like it or not, and some of us believe it is better to change with it than to be swept away by it. You agree with me? Liara said, surprised. I am old, Vex said. I have served the council for over 1,000 years, and I have watched us become smaller and more afraid. With each passing century, I do not know if we can be fixed, but I know we cannot continue as we are. So, this is a test, Liara said. This is a chance, Vex corrected, for you to prove that cooperation with humanity can work, and for humanity to prove they are serious about building alliances rather than empires. And if we succeed, Liara asked, then perhaps the council will remember what it was meant to be, Vex said, and if we fail, then at least we tried, which is more than we have done for a very long time. Liara stood and bowed deeply. Thank you, she said. I will not waste this opportunity. See that you do not, Vex replied. And Scout Liara, yes. Be careful, humans are not the only ones watching how this unfolds. There are species in the galaxy who benefit from the council remaining weak and divided. They will not be happy about potential human council cooperation. Liara understood the warning. I will be careful, she promised. Good, Vex said. Now go. You have a ship waiting to take you back to Earth, and I believe Captain Torres is expecting you. Liara left the meeting room with her heart lighter than it had been in days. Ember chirped happily, sensing her mood, while Frost rumbled his approval. As she walked toward the docking bay, she passed other scouts and council workers, and she wondered how many of them also had doubts. How many of them also wanted change but were too afraid to speak. Maybe she could not fix the council alone, but she could help build something new. A partnership between humans and the species willing to stand for something more than political survival. When her ship launched toward Earth, she looked back at Council Station 7 one last time and felt no regret, only hope. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in her 300 years of life, Liara felt like she was part of something that mattered. Something worth fighting for. Ember chirped and settled against her shoulder while Frost lay across the pilot seat behind her, and together they flew toward a future that no one could predict, but everyone would remember. The Deathworlders had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same.